I mean, I don't think they're as important for business owners. What I'm asking you now, it's more curiosity questions that have come my way. But I think for business owners particularly, it's, do I have to ask for someone's status? Do I have the right to ask for someone's status? Once I know someone's status, do I have to discriminate against them, or can I still let them into my shop? Could I use a thermometer as a reasonable precautionary step and make my own reasonable judgment with my COVID safety plan so that I can ensure the safety of myself, my staff, my patrons? And the purpose of this interview, folks, for those of you who are listening, is to get you thinking, because my volunteer, he's taken the time to read through. He loves reading through, and you're listening to him. But, you know, even he, although he might not have all the answers at the drop of a hat, he's willing to go back and read again. And too often, as consumers of information, we just believe what we're told. And what we're being told by politicians and by mainstream media is not necessarily true. It might have elements of facts to it, but it doesn't mean that it's true in its entirety. And so what we want you to do is start to learn to think critically, not just assume that because people on social media are all saying that this is the way it is, that it actually is that way. Because I've learned a lot in this last 3 months just from reading and reading and reading different pieces of legislation. I'm entirely grateful and thankful that I have people who are far smarter than me when it comes to this kind of thing, who are willing to sit and read and give me these bits of information for you folks so that you can be educated. But don't take our word for it. Go and read for yourself, educate yourself, because the more you do, the more you will be able to come up with creative solutions. So that brings me, I did have another few questions, but I don't think that's really so important right now. I'll want to nutshell it now for the people who are listening, because right now people are just looking for a solution to what is happening right at this moment. Do I have to ask, once I have found out, do I have to discriminate? Can I look at reasonable steps other than saying if you're unjabbed, you can't come in? So could you potentially give us a case scenario around what, you know, Jeff, the cafe owner, could do with his own store so that he can choose to trade with jabbed and unjabbed patrons, still stay on the right side of legislation, but in a reasonable way where he doesn't have to act against his own conscience? Is there something that you can say to that in a nutshell for people who are listening? Because I know that I've been reading a lot, I get overwhelmed. A lot of other people get overwhelmed. And so if we can nutshell this for them at the end of this conversation, I know that they would be very grateful. So what would you say to Jeff, the cafe owner, who wants to serve all, but wants to make sure that he does so in a way that he doesn't end up in hot water with health officers or with police officers?
I would say it's the reasonable excuse. It's being reasonable. You can say that you are not comfortable in collecting people's medical sensitive information. You're not properly trained for that. You can take alternative measures. You can believe the salt water. You could have a container with paper cups at the front. Everybody who walks in, you could say to them, I just need you to gargle with some salt water. Have somewhere they can spit it out. It has been shown to be really good at clearing your upper respiratory tract. Get them to gargle. It's they're using it in Danish countries, like over in Norway, and it's being reasonable, showing that you are trying to deal with the issue. You are not ignoring it. You don't think treating people differently where the science says that there is no difference between it. The health system is showing that there is no difference. If you look at the New South Wales health data, they're the only ones who are really reporting it properly, and even they're skewing it quite a bit. There's more people in ICU that are vaccinated. It's over 77% of people in hospital are double vaccinated, and going up higher now. Even if when you consider that 80% of the population is vaccinated, that's only a 2-to-1 odds. So there's so many other issues around infection and bad reaction. Weight is a really big one, pre-existing comorbidities. There is issues around, you could even give your patrons like a vitamin D tablet. Science has been shown that 9 out of 10 people who die from COVID have low vitamin D. And vitamin D is really important in an immune response. Every cell in the body has vitamin D receptors, so it will support your body in so many ways. You could provide education to your patrons about some of the things. There's a treatment called budesonide. It's a common asthma drug. Studies have shown in over 65-year-olds, it reduces time to recovery by 3 days.
Wow.
which is almost on par with what the vaccine is alleging to do.
Wow.
So that's about one of the last things that it's doing. They're saying is improving time to recovery, which decreases because you're exposed to it less. You get less overall negative effects. You don't get the long-term effects. If they say if your infection goes over 7 days, you're much more likely to get that long COVID and things like that. And vitamin C and zinc are shown to reduce time to recovery again by a day. There was another, so I have to mention this. It says in there, the pandemic, the Health and Wellbeing Act, that the principle of precautionary risk, the precautionary principle, if a public health risk poses a serious threat, lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing measures to prevent or control the public health risk.
Wow.
So even if you can't prove what you're doing is correct, you should be doing it anyway. And this goes against them banning ivermectin, which Japan and Uttar Pradesh have been using for about 6 months, and their cases have virtually disappeared.
Wow.
And just like Djokovic, who got kicked out because he was encouraging people to not vaccinate, ivermectin was banned. One of the 3 reasons it was banned for, because it was encouraging people to not vaccinate. And they shouldn't be banning it because lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason. But there is some overwhelming, so there's like 77 studies showing that ivermectin has like a 76% improvement rate in people. And its safety profile is really safe, like millions and millions of doses for decades, when used properly, as all medications. Did you hear over in the US when they had those they had a news story, gunshot victims had to wait outside in ambulances while they treated horse dewormer victims, and it was all bunk. It was just a thing to put people off ivermectin, and it went through all the major national newspapers, like all through all of the big newspapers in the US. And then when it came out that it was just absolute rubbish, because somebody actually called the hospital to check what was going on after it had gone worldwide, and it was like, they said, no, that never happened. There was no retraction, no back step. And yet if somebody had been doing that misinformation to the vaccine, they would have had the full force of the law put down upon them. Whereas ivermectin has been proven to be not just a treatment, it's a prophylactic as well. It can prevent infection.
And I love that you've taken it in that direction, because it is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and people loved it before it became anti-narrative. So in closing, just because you're hearing something on social media or in mainstream news or in alternative news, it doesn't mean that you are bound to that. There are creative ways, there are reasonable steps that as a business owner, if you sit down, make yourself a cup of tea, Get yourself out of a state of anxiety and into a state of curiosity. Have been able to listen to this conversation today with someone who loves reading legislation, and that's why I wanted to get him on, so that you could hear it with your ears rather than trying to get it in through your eyes. But now that you've listened to this conversation, and you're probably feeling a little bit more heard, empathized with, supported, that not all is actually lost in Victoria. You can be creative, you can take reasonable steps, you can move to trade through what is going on, so that we can all get to the other side, and get to the other side without having to medically segregate the entire community. So to my volunteer, who remains anonymous for certain reasons, because I don't want my volunteers getting trolled. I get trolled enough myself, and I don't want that happening to my volunteers either. So thank you to my wonderful volunteer. I will probably get him on to explain some other legislation at another time. But for those of you who are listening to this, rest assured that this police pack has been taken directly from the legislation. It has also received a final look over by our legal department. They are practicing lawyers now. Whether or not you believe in lawyers or just believe in common law or whatever that looks like, we want to ensure that there are enough checks and balances put in place so that the information that we're giving out to you is balanced, is trustworthy, and you can then take it and make the decisions that you need to make for your certain business. So thank you to my volunteer, and I look forward to having you on the next call.
My pleasure. I hope I could help.